That is an excellent segue based upon Roger Stone to what has currently been going on in good old US of A with the crazy election. What's going on, Ricky?
Beats the hell out of me. I have no idea. To be honest, it's like I don't know. I mean, every day, like there's more news, and Trump's accusing Biden of fraud, and of course there's fraud. There's always fraud. The only difference is what extent it is. I mean, there's a great documentary. People haven't seen it. It's called "Hacking Democracy." It's actually another HBO movie. HBO does some good stuff apparently from time to time.
Definitely.
In Hacking Democracy, I mean, they show how easy it is to just rig these machines. And I think before the election, like I mean, I don't care about voting anyways because you're picking the least of two evils. One thing I've said a lot of late is just the fact that I just want my life back, and I feel like if people vote for Biden, we're closer to the tyranny that we're all afraid of, and if we vote for Trump, we might be a little further from that tyranny. We might
Mm,
still, like Charlie Robinson said on I think the last Union of Wanted, and he actually said in a way that I was thinking, but didn't know how to verbalize it. They're both going to take you into the car, into the fire, or into whatever world they want to create. The only difference is like we feel like Joe Biden's going to get us there quicker, and at least Trump will get there a little slower. Maybe give us a little bit more time to fight back and expose some of the stuff that's going on. So it just I don't know. I mean, there was Ben Swan has been doing reports on this. A bunch of other people in the alternative media community have been doing reports on this. Without a doubt, there's a lot of shisty things that have happened during this election, and a lot of weird things with the machines that they used, and the connections to certain politicians and people in regards to that. And then also, uh, and I'm sure the right also did some fuckery. They did something wrong too, and did some fraud, or did some played the game. But unfortunately, it's a dirty game. So it's like you can't win unless you play the dirty game the way the other team is playing it, and that's what's that saying? If you're not trying to cheat, you're not trying to win, or something like that.
something like that. I've heard it. Yes.
Like, so I feel like that's they're probably both doing it. I'm just curious if the Trump administration is right, and this year was so much worse than other years. And the only reason I would kind of entertain that is, one, Ben Swan has done some decent reporting on some of the really weird things that have been going on during when they were counting the votes and whatnot. But two, also this COVID thing is the agenda is being just I mean, it's on nitrous and it's flying, and they're pushing the agenda so quickly that I'm curious if they, what extremes they would go if they would go to these extremes to take away our civil liberties and take away our rights and put masks on little kids and mandate vaccines on little kids and all this stuff. It is just why wouldn't they rig an election to some extent that's far beyond anything they've ever done before? It's not out of the realm of possibility. So I think it's gotten to the point where there's so much back and forth where people have kind of just given up on paying attention to it. At least a lot of people that I've talked to, they're just like, I think initially there was some hope, and I'm not saying I had hope, but I think a lot of people on the right had hope that maybe he's still going to find a way to pull it off. He's going to find a way to either, just prove that there's been enough fraud where you can't count these ballots, or something has to be done, which I think it ends up getting to the point where, like, I don't know, the courts get involved like they did with the Al Gore election, Al Gore Bush
Bush.
election. And
Hmm.
so so I'm super curious, what's going to end up happening. But right now, a lot of people do have the feeling that, like, hey, just accept the fact that Biden is the winner, regardless if he wants to smell little kids and whatnot. But I don't know. The
Was
whole
that Ricky? So, I mean, there's two main things with Sleepy Joe Biden, as he's been dubbed. One, as you've highlighted there, the inappropriate touching of young children in front of people on camera, which has been documented multiple times. And then the was it 94 crime bill that he did?
Yeah, he was a part of the '94 crime bill, which ended up locking up a lot of just black minority people, and which created what, like, one parent households,
Yes.
the likelihood of one parent household children to end up in prison are much higher. So it's like, and then you look at his vice president, Harris.
Wow.
I mean, she notoriously will put people in prison or keep people in prison who have been proven to be innocent because she wants to get that W, she wants to get that win, and she wants to make sure that it's about winning that game. It's not about what's right or what's wrong. I mean, that's the thing about the courts. I mean, it's not about what's right or what's wrong. It's what you can prove and you can't prove. And somebody who has a good lawyer could stay out of prison, and somebody who doesn't and can't afford a good lawyer goes to prison for this that exact same thing. So there's
Yes.
no, people. I mean, some people, I get it. They truly believe in the system. I think, like many systems, if they were does the way they were designed, if that's the way it actually worked, then maybe you could say, hey, the system, if everything goes the way it's supposed to go, and you just completely disregard that the fact that it's run by people and that are corrupt and have other agendas, then maybe, yeah, maybe I get the idea of believing in the system. But I just think that you can't ignore all the statistics that prove that people, if you're a minority, you're much more likely to do more time for the exact same thing as somebody else. If you're also classism, so if you're poor, you're much more likely because you can't hire a lawyer, expensive
Yes.
lawyer. I mean, I know people who have lost their license for long periods of time for a DUI, and for their first DUI or whatnot. And then I know people who have multiple DUIs who still have their licenses, and that's because they were willing to hire the best, you know,
Mm,
attorney specific for those type of issues in Massachusetts, and you get a smack on the wrist. So it's like, is it about, putting criminals in prison, or is it about, can you afford to stay out of prison? It just, yeah, it's wild. So he's not, and let's be honest, he's obviously on some type of drugs. The dude couldn't even finish the sentence.
mm.
We were talking about YouTube earlier. I mean, his YouTube commercial, like, it sounded like, I mean, I'm not a great speaker, but if I had enough takes, I could sound great. And then if I was running for president, I could definitely find at least one perfect take, put together one perfect take, because I know that it's a big deal. This guy, I mean, if that was his best take, that's pretty bad, and I'm waiting for someone to hack in and, like, find some of his crappy takes and just release them to see how many times he
Let's do that again. Let's do that from the top.
him just throwing f bombs because he's so frustrated. But I mean, without a doubt, they have him on Adderall or something. I mean, this dude, even you ever think about, like, the debates? You're at a podium for, like, hours, like 2 hours. Like,
Mhm.
I'm a healthy person. I'm 35. But even in my 20s, if I was standing still for too long in one spot, my back's gonna tighten up.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be uncomfortable. How the fuck do these old farts on stage with like for hours? Don't even move one bit. First of all, would they not get thirsty? These guys barely drink, and they're on stage. Old guys, just no problem whatsoever. I'm like, there's no doubt they're on some shit. I know a lot of old people, they can't stay on for long. These
No.
guys are, like, I mean, are pretty,
Pensioners, they're old age pensioners. Let's be polite about it. They're elderly people.
it's crazy. I mean, either they're freak of natures, or they're, without a doubt, they're on some shit. And and of course, if you're the president, you have the best doctors, and I get all that, but to think that they're not on some other drugs for cognitive function and all, those type of things, and cognitive fatigue, yeah, I wouldn't doubt it. I wouldn't doubt it one bit. So it's just, what we see, it might not even be who they really are if you sat them down and got them off all the drugs. I mean, they might be complete slow thinking idiots. So it's, yeah, it's, we and the other thing too, it's like how caught up we get in the elections, even though we know it's theater, right? I mean, we know that when they do speeches, that, yeah, they have speech writers, and they spend a lot of time figuring out how to say things, different ways of saying things, what words to use and not use, to get us to think a certain way and feel a certain way. So we know it's all being manipulated, right? It doesn't matter who's saying it. Like, if you like a speech, or you get, I don't know, some type of specific emotion from a speech, like, oh, this guy's powerful, or this guy's demanding, or this guy is a presidential. That's all a illusion, because it wasn't organic. It wasn't something that they came up with. It wasn't who they were as a person, and they were just up there freestyling. It was
Yes.
it's all a illusion.
Pre-planned.
And it shows how dumb people are that still they will get caught up and be like, oh, he's such a good speaker. Okay, like he's a good actor. Like,
You hit the nail on the head, Ronald Reagan.
yeah,
Okay. So what the powers that should definitely not be have done is they have created and morphed a society where it's about feeling good. It's about looking good. Oh, I like the way, Trump looks, or, he's a powerful man. I like the way he does his speeches. And it's not about the content of the character. It's not about what they're actually going to do for the American public and the greater population, the global population. Like, what are we doing? Are we dropping bombs on loads of different countries? Are we, like, well, what are we actually doing? Are we building an infrastructure to create ease of transport? Are we lowering the class divide? Are we getting the homeless off the street? I mean, I'm constantly hearing podcasters in California rip the hell out of the what's going on in LA with the homeless people, Skid Row and all that. Like that is like America is promoted as like the superpower, you know. The streets are lined with gold and land of opportunity.
you ever been to New York?
Oh, yes, I certainly have.
It's a fucking dump. It's not. It's not. It's not lined. It's lined with trash. That's what it's lined with. I mean, I hate to say it, and I mean, I have family in Long Island and other parts of New York and whatnot, but New York City is one of the most disappointing. And don't get me wrong, I've had tons of fun in New York City when I'm not sober and I'm walking around and I got a nice little buzz. I'm in a good mood. We're hopping bar to bar, so I can kind of disregard the homeless people and the
Yeah,
place. But if you go there sober, it's just I mean, okay, maybe it's because of those expectations, right? We go there thinking like this is supposed to be like the greatest city on earth. This is
mhm,
supposed to be like there's songs written about it. There's people who fall in love with it. There's
mhm.
all these things about it. And you get there and you're like, I'm kind of fucking disappointed. Like this is, there's other cities I'd rather spend time in. It's definitely not a clean city. I mean, there's something about the energy of the city that I guess people like. I get it. You get that many people. It's a city that never sleeps. Now it's a city that never opens. It's it's just one of those things where just like I get the energy, I get the like how
Buzz.
it can be yeah, the buzz, it's contagious, right? Because it's like going to the gym, right? And you go to the gym and you might not be motivated, but the second you see other people working hard and doing, sweating and getting their reps in and getting a good workout in, it motivates you like, yeah, stop being a lazy
Yeah,
bastard and come on,
just
get
do
your,
it, mate.
push
Yeah.
yourself. Yeah. So I get that feeling in a city. I like I like that aspect of it, but I also think there's a lot you can get for the mental health being away from all that, from just being near nature, having time to reflect, having time to be peaceful, having time to re-examine your life and your thoughts. And you don't get that in a city. I mean, when they talk about like a New York minute, when they were, and you know what that means, right? Like
Yeah.
is a New York minute is the equivalent of like an hour for somebody else. It's just and it's because it's always go go go.
It's hustle and bustle.
Yeah, that's great, but geez, you can make some bad decisions, when you're not thinking them out, and you can also dehumanize other people because you're just worried about yourself. Like that causes some long-term issues, I think, the way you look at things. And so I think when you're young, it's a I get it. I get the idea of being drawn to that, but I know people who live in the city and they pay a whole lot for a place right out of the city where they can have some property and have a backyard. I mean that's like unheard of in the
I
city,
know.
having a backyard. You live in apartments, you live in whatever.
Lofts, converted lofts worth
uh,
6.6 million pounds in a gentrified part of New York City or Harlem, which was formerly 6 years ago a damn crack den.
yep.
You're not cooking your own food. It's food on the go constantly. You're jumping into little subways. You're on top of each other. As you described, the energy of all of these thousands, millions of people all stacked up on each other like little flipping, little batteries. It's not the best in regards to for conducive living. having access to green spaces, nature, your own private space.
What's a well, you do you live near London or anywhere near a city?
Well, we're Birmingham, so that's Birmingham's the second city, well, formally it's the second city, um, but we're like an hour and a half away from London. So w- w- going to London is exactly almost like a New York type scenario. Birmingham is busy, but not as busy as London. Definitely not.
And is London pretty close to New York in regards to people and population and craziness and energy and that
I
type of
would
thing?
say so. Yeah, they're mirror images of each other. I would say.
How are things been? Well, I know Brian Rose was running for mayor. Did that? I actually lost track of that story because I've been so caught up with other stuff. What happened with that? Did he have any success? Any
It,
luck?
mm, no,
Oof.
no. From what I've seen, there was some momentum, but I haven't. To be fair, I haven't heard anything in the last week and a half to 2 weeks. But there was a lot of momentum, and then from what I've seen, it's kind of like died of a cold, should we say? Unfortunately, I think we've had a lot of people with good intentions and goodwill, but what we need is people to not only talk about it, but to actually do it, to actually sign these things, to share the information, to actually to walk and talk it rather than just literally talking and maybe saying, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We need to have a really unified front to enable that to really manifest.
Well, the crazy thing is that it seems like from the outside looking in, like so in America, the blue states, so the states that are mostly liberals and Democrat mayors and politicians have been without a doubt the worst. I live in a blue state in Massachusetts, but we have a Republican governor who really just turned Democrat when this all happened. Like he's been really equally as bad as many of the blue states, if not worse. And mandating the flu vaccine for kids going back to school, all these ridiculous things. And just a couple of weeks ago, mandating masks in public. Like, how ridiculous is this? That you're asking people, like, you can argue the science of masks. I get it. Like, you can truly say, okay, even though you're making a good argument, I can understand. I could even start to understand the idea that, okay, wearing something on your face, even if it's not perfect, could help a little bit. I can understand the logic in that type
Hmm.
of thing. But when people hear the governor say you should wear a mask when you're by yourself,
Yeah.
it doesn't matter if you're hiking, it doesn't matter if you live in a fucking woods by yourself in a cabin. Like what are people thinking when they hear this? Like, it's a perfect example that this isn't about safety, it's about compliance.
Hmm.
And I've said this over and over again, and I'm sure you probably have heard it, and I'm sorry if you have to hear me say it again, but it's a perfect example of a perfect example of this being about compliance is the fact that it doesn't matter what you wear in your face. It doesn't matter if you wear a N95 mask, which supposedly is supposed to be better for the spread of it or stopping the spread of it, or you wear a neck gaiter, or you wear a rag, or you wear a whatever, a bandana. It doesn't matter as long as you're compliant with the rules, they're okay with it, even though there's no science showing that a bandana, or what I've been seeing, I've seen the last couple months too, is like these face shields, that
Yes, the perspex cleary ones. Yeah.
it's so ridiculous. I wonder if people put like rain decks on that or put winter wipers, or wouldn't be a bad idea. But it's so silly. And I'm like, how is that stopping the spread of anything? Like, but it's about compliance. If I wore one of those things everywhere, I would look like an idiot, but everybody be okay with me going into their store and going. I mean, I went to the mall this weekend with my family, and my son was we're at like this little toy store, and after I always tell him, like, listen, the rules are to wear it on your face, just put it under your chin and nobody's going to say shit to you. I'm like, you're a little kid. I don't say shit to my 5 year old,
Mm,
but I say nobody's
yeah.
going to say. But you got my point.
Yes.
And usually they don't. I mean, they don't ever say anything, because who's going to tell a 5 year old, like, hey, put on your mask, jerk? It's so I tell him, like, just wear it on your chin and nobody's gonna say anything. It looks like you're making an effort, and hopefully nobody says anything. And like I said, for the most part, nobody does. we go to this toy store, we're checking out, and the guy's like, hey, here's this stuff that smells really good, put it on your hands, and it's sanitizer. And then he's like, hey, and push that mask up, I don't want you to get sick, right? Yeah, like kind of like being friendly and
Yeah.
cute about it. And I'm like, oh my god. And it took me a second. I'm like, do I engage or do I leave? Because if I engage, it
Yeah.
might get I might get a little frustrated. I have my son here, and so I'm like, you know what? It's easier just to be friendly, and then
Yeah.
it's like, I'm
But
like, oh, thanks,
you,
bud. And we
you,
walk out.
you know what, Ricky? At least he employed the nice approach rather than I've seen videos, and I'm pretty sure you've seen these videos of people, literally being like, Gestapo. What are you doing without a mask on? You need to wear a mask. You're putting my life at danger. This and that, and then potentially this turning into something physical. So at least this gentleman had the common. Oh no, let's rephrase that. Had the sense to try a different route.
Absolutely. I mean, I will take that in consideration that they were friendly about it because I've gotten in heat a few more heated arguments because people will be. I mean, they're just so sure of where they stand. And, I had somebody right before the election, because right before the election, people were getting really tense and people were getting real patriotic about where they stood. And usually when I go to the gym, the second I walk in, because it's required to wear one when you walk in, I take off my mask. And then I do this like I feel like a kid in high school getting in trouble again. But what I do is like when I'm at the gym, every time an employee my buddy's actually the manager. So I know I'm not going to get kicked out of the gym, but I'm just tired of people coming up to me and be like, hey, can you put on the gym? I mean, can you put on the mask while you're at the gym? So what I'll do is like every time they come by, I'll pretend I take a sip. I like reserve all my drinking water for when employees. And then I'm like, hey, I'm not going to harass that dude that he's drinking. You can't wear a mask while you're drinking. So I would do that all the time. And then so I would never wear it, because anytime an employee came around, I would just drink and whatnot. So then this guy, right before the day, I think it was a day before the election, somebody's like, how come you never wear your mask? Just came up right next to me, and he's like, I'm just curious, why? How come you never wear your mask? And I'm like, I could already tell. I'm like, first of all, if you're really concerned about my mask, why are you so damn close to me? But
Yeah.
we start talking, and I was telling him, I'm like, this is kind of ridiculous, right? Like, can we agree it doesn't really do anything? If you're really that concerned about it, you shouldn't be at the gym, because me and you are touching the same spray nozzle, even though we're wiping things, we're touching the same uh, paper towels, we're touching all the same shit. You can't stop the spread of the germs while we're in this facility. So little by little, as I chipped away and I saw his face, like we talked about the PCR tests, about which I just shared a video recently with my boy Josh from World Alternative Media, and what happened in Portugal, and that they've kind of come to terms that like the PCR test is not a test, it's a method, and you basically it's not a a good way of testing somebody for the virus. So, but I'm talking to him about the PCR test and talking to him about like all the false positives and how the numbers have been wrong, and just giving him all this information. Of course, his face just goes blank, and he's like, "Well, I just feel like people are flaunting not wearing a mask, like the Trump supporters." I'm like, "Oh, this is
That's
about."
what it's about.
Yeah, and literally that's what all it's become. It's become a political thing. Like nobody is arguing if it makes a difference or not. Nobody's arguing if any of these things. It's just it's a political thing. Like people are using the mask as their Trump flag or Biden flag, and it's their way of protesting the other side. And you either wearing one, it's like, I heard Joe Rogan say this on his a recent podcast, and it's so true. Like people who put their profile picture on social media with a mask on, or do podcasts with a mask on, or take selfies with a mask on. Like, what is wrong? Like, you're literally just saying, hey, look at me, I'm a good person, and I want everybody to acknowledge that I'm a good person and see I'm a good person. It's like, this is ridiculous. Like, you don't. It's frustrating, and it has become a political tool or a political protest. And but you know what? Fuck it, because if not wearing a mask or my kids not wearing a mask is a protest, and people have a problem with that, then I'd love to sit them down and be like, hey, do you have a problem with when people are protesting other things like the Black Lives Matter movement or the lockdowns, or because I'm pro protest in all aspects. I mean,
Yes.
I'm for Black Lives Matter protests as long as they're protests, because just like we talked about with the crime bill, we know for a fact there has been some inherent racism in the system.
Mhm,
And
mhm.
an inherent classism. I mean, this is another thing is like minorities are more, the percentage of them that are in the lower middle class or or poor in poverty are much higher. So if there's classism, yeah, they're going to be affected the most. So I agree with all that stuff. And but we have to be right down the middle where it's like
Exactly.
if I'm for protests, I'm for protests. I think protests are necessary.
Yeah.
I think they're important. I think, things like Occupy Wall Street and all these other things, and of course they end up bringing in like agent provocateur.
Antifa, and then, as you say, yes, most definitely.
Yeah, and so I think that we have to be consistent with our views. Like if you're for protest, then you're for protest. Then we should be able to protest everything. And so if I want to protest by not wearing a fucking mask, then that's my way of protesting. And at least I'm not burning down a business or harming anybody. It's my peaceful protest. And if you're so afraid of me not wearing a mask while you're in a gym, then you know what? Maybe you should be working on it at home. Because the truth is, if there was some way of putting on a black light and turning off all the lights and seeing all the germs all over the place, there'd be fucking germs everywhere because people are putting down their masks all day at the gym because they're breathing heavy, because they're sick of wearing it, and all this stuff. And now that election's over, you're seeing more and more liberals at my gym that are just completely taking off their masks because they're sweaty and then putting it back on. Before it's like they wouldn't even put it down just a bit, and now they're more comfortable with doing it because they don't feel like the other side's going to judge them on it. Just like the whole thing is just frustrating because I'm for people, man. I'm not for the left or the right bullshit. I'm for people. I'm fighting the things that I'm fighting for. It are things that we all will enjoy.
Mhm.
Freedom. We
Yes.
all enjoy freedom. We all should have the fucking right to go live our lives. I mean, we don't know how long we're going to live, but the life expectancy, whatever it is, 70 something or whatever, which is actually less than the medium age of people dying of the coronavirus. You can look that up.
Mhm.
It's true. It's so the life expectancy, like you don't, so we know that we're not going to live forever. Our life expectancy, pretend it's 75 or whatever it may be, we don't get that time back. So all these things of like, we'll just wait, we'll just lock down a little longer, we'll just wear masks a little longer, you don't get that fucking time back. And we're also you have to also take in consideration that tomorrow's not promised. We all say that shit, but what happened during this lockdown is that all of a sudden everybody believed that tomorrow's always promised, and we have plenty of years ahead of us to enjoy. So just sacrifice these days or these months or this year. It's like it's such a silly thing. There's people I know. I know people who didn't get to see the end of 2020. So to me, like this idea of taking every day for granted is fucking ridiculous, and people need to be upset and people need to get worked up because it's not. I mean, this DC, have you heard about this DC law? Actually, New World next week with James Corbett and James Evan Pilato did a little report on it, and I've been talking about it on my podcast. And I just saw recently that it was just passed that, or at least it's like right there to get passed. In regards to this bill where you're giving in DC, you're giving 11-year-olds consent. They have the ability to consent to a vaccine in school, and
What?
yeah, and you don't have to tell their parents.
Parents?
You don't have to tell their parents. They can consent to it, and all you have to do, I believe, is just forward that information to the pediatrician. So if that kid gets some type of allergic reaction or some type of negative reaction, gets sick from it, if that kid forgets that it could have been from the vaccine, which he could have easily forget about because of the fact that chances are nobody's going to tell that kid that, hey, vaccines can cause
Oh
injuries
no.
right before they stab him with one. So that kid might not bring it up, and he could have a harmful effect from the vaccine, and that parent might never know that it's from that vaccine. Like this is fucking insanity. I mean, this idea that like going to a concert, flying on a plane, will all need a negative test,
Yeah.
okay, or a vaccine. Like this is
Are
crazy.
they talking about house passports over in America as well?
Yeah, yes, yeah, all that stuff. I mean, it's nonsense. I mean, they're just fast forwarding to the end game, which is tracking all of
Yeah.
us all the time everywhere. And this just makes it easier. I mean, the contact tracing apps that are on our phones that we didn't download or give consent to download. I mean, all this stuff is just there, it's just when is it gonna stop? Like people keep thinking like it's protecting you from what? We're supposed to flatten the curve of deaths. Now we're talking about flattening the curve of fucking cases.
Yeah.
Look at all these football players, in Europe, that got it.
Yeah.
None of them are fucking dead.
Of
None of them.
course not,
You know,
because they're fit and healthy, and also they're backed by multi-million-dollar football clubs who can say, you know what do we need to do to ensure this person immune system is good enough so he can survive this um zombie thing. I never mentioned the name.
sorry, I don't want to get kicked off YouTube.
No, no, all good, Ricky, all good, all good. Um, I think you've highlighted some excellent things there. Um, let me work back in reverse. I'm not too sure if you've seen the video I've recently posted, but I'm not too sure what part of England it is. I'm waiting for the actual full data to come back. But a mother, a child came home. I think she was 12, and explained to her mother she just obviously come home, and at school, the NHS, the National Health Service, were there, and they injected all of the children with some kind of vaccination. I'm pretty sure it's to do with what we're talking about, without parental consent. There was no warning. This was done straight in school. Um, so the mother's obviously livid. She's totally upset. She didn't provide any authorization. She's not, interested in vaccinations, etc. And this is what they. This is the plan. So, and this isn't like there hasn't been any laws that have been put into place for this. We've got the Public Health Act of 1974. We've got the new Corona Act, which has been sort of passed through hella quickly, at the start of the year. But there's nothing in there to state that they can come into schools and do that. But then, rewinding 2 weeks prior, there was a big thing to say in Liverpool. Yeah, Liverpool, because that's like on one of the highest tiers of lockdown. They are actually sending in a letter was sent to all the parents to say we're sending in the army to the schools to vaccinate no, no, not to vaccinate, sorry, to test all of the children, to track them, and to separate positive to negative. Like, what are we
That
doing here?
that's crazy. I mean, it's crazy because when you look at everything, the conspiracy theories, and I'm using that term because that's what we're called in many cases. Everything we've been saying has been correct. The fact that the numbers have been inflated, the fact that tests can't be trusted, the fact that there's all these other agendas and all these other reasons to push fear and these huge numbers, and they're not reporting on any positive information. How about the news tells us how many people are getting it and surviving? Like, what
Mm-hmm.
percentage of people are testing positive who are surviving? Like, it's probably a ridiculous amount of people, and that number has increased very much because of the fact that now they're making everybody get tested. If you test positive and you're around anybody, everybody that you're around also has to get tested. Then everybody else also has to get tested. And everybody else and I have so many friends that have gotten it, and I'm just like, most of them, if not all of them, have had mild to no symptoms. So I'm like, what are we doing here? We're changing the structure of our world, the structure of our society. We're changing everything for a virus that does nothing to the majority of people. And I there's so many stories. I'm telling you, if you talk to people, there's so many stories of people who lost loved ones in 2020, and they'll have COVID-19 as
Yeah.
the cause of death, and they'll already be old. I was just listening to Del Bigtree's High Wire, which was I think it was last week's episode, where he was talking about the percentage of people who died of COVID-19 this year who were going to die this year anyways, like people who were already at the end of their line because they're really sick,
Mm-hmm.
or they have been hospitalized, or they're already close to like the average life expectancy anyways. So that's something we're not even taking into consideration. How many of these people were going to already die anyways? I hate to say it, but a large portion.
Mm-hmm. 80+%, I would say. And then
Yeah.
and then again, look into it. I mean, for the last 9+ months, there's been no other records of homicides, diabetes, cancer deaths,
Flu.
alcohol, cirrhosis of the liver, anything. It's all been this zombie apocalypse thing that's going on. No, there's just shark attacks. Has anyone been? No problem at all. There's been no shark attacks. There's been nothing. To round this off, Signor, what should we put forth as a solution? What can we do as le people to make some kind of change?
Honestly, I think what we're doing is a start. I think people need to talk about it. I think people need to let